World War II veterans who will share their stories of flying P-38s and P-47s. And we have three of them up in the panel up in front. They're going to be speaking to you one at a time, after which we can take a few minutes of time to do some questions and answers of these men. And we'd like to start off with the first presenter, whose name is Philip Savides. Little information about Phil. Phil was born in 1920, and he spent most of his childhood in Racine, Wisconsin. Just as World War II was getting started, he entered Carroll College at Waukesha, Wisconsin, where he was pleased to discover, after some time passed, that he could add to his ordinary college course and receive aviation and flight training under the Civil Flight Training Program, sponsored by the federal government. After earning a private pilot license, he continued his ordinary college schoolwork and wondered for months in these days of the draft if he might be asked to serve on the ground instead of soaring aloft with his white silk scarf dramatically in his drop blast. He did get his wish. It's my pleasure to introduce Phil Savides. Phil?
Thank you very much. I'm glad to reminisce about the good old days, but they weren't all good. You know, when I thought about talking to a group of people who had some interest in flying, I wondered about how many of you know with any precision what the P-47 Thunderbolt looked like. So I'll try to describe it to you. Head on, the P-47 had a peculiar air intake, and it kind of chided her because she didn't look very good coming at you because it was shaped exactly like a toilet seat. And to make her consistent with her ponderousness, she was kind of overweight, kind of obese. In fact, can you imagine 7.5 tons? How many Lexus would it take to weigh 7.5 tons? And to haul that tonnage around, it had a huge engine. How many cylinders does it take to fly? For a P-47, it took 18 cylinders in a circle. A radial engine, probably one of the biggest ones you've ever seen. A lot of new ideas were introduced in the P-47, which made her the machine that it was. I think back sometimes I was surprised when I realized that air-cooled engine was different than many other machines. Obviously, it cooled by air, but one of the refinements on the Thunderbolt was that it not only cooled the engine by blowing air through the fins, but it ran hot oil through the radiator. So although the Thunderbolt didn't have a radiator like a P-51, which would make it vulnerable, it ran its oil system through a little special cooling radiator. In this day of concern about $3 and $4 gasoline, I look back and I'm pleased to remember, I can tell you that when I smoked in those days, we could fill our cigarette lighters with 100 octane gasoline, and there was not a nickel charge to have a simple lighter filled up with gasoline. That Thunderbolt had a huge engine. I said 18 cylinders. It displaced 2,800 cubic inches. That's about 4 times the biggest car we have going nowadays. And to make it, emphasize the sturdiness of the machine, It had short, stubby legs, but they're widely spaced, so even an amateur like me could run it down the runway without being too concerned about going off too fast to the left or right. And one more thing about how big a hero I am, you have to remember that huge as this 7.5-ton airplane was, there was only one guy aboard. And I was a little modest to think that I would be asked to perform the functions of pilot, navigator, engineer, and all the different things it takes to run the airplane. I never did learn how much air pressure it takes to put in the tires, but thank goodness we had a fine crew that kept things in shape for us, and I didn't even have trouble starting it, because usually after they woke me up in the morning, while I was getting breakfast, they were warming it up and getting it precisely ready for me to get aboard with every nickel's worth of gasoline they had put in it, ready for my takeoff. So I want to tell you about one particular mission in my career. Incidentally, I flew, not as particular, but I flew 101 combat missions in World War II. First of all, I started flying out of England just before the invasion, moved to France, and our function was to protect our enemy, our friends from the enemy, and protect the enemy from getting into our own troops. We worked very close to our own troops. So the function was close support. On one mission, toward the end of the war, when the German energy seemed to be declining, we were beginning to feel confident that at last, long last, we would be able to cruise over France and see some action that we could attack. Perhaps a truck or a jeep or some vehicle. We would attack wagon trains pulled by horses. And of course the luxury of all was to attack a locomotive or a railroad train. And so that was our function, trying to disturb the enemy's ability to transport things forward or backward on the interval between their army and ours. And one of the first missions I took as a leading flight turned out to be a little disastrous. For me, it frightened me terribly. And I was a little sensitive about the fact that I was green, and I took off. I think it was a 12-year flight, and just as we entered the enemy area, I looked down and I saw what looked like a convoy of German trucks on the highway. And that was a prize we all coveted, to see enemy trucks that were carrying their troops back to their homeland. And if we could attack, it would mean a big difference in the advance of the Americans to the east. So we dove down, my wingman and I made a beautiful pass. It was just an absolute setup for me, passing down this block after block of vehicles with my 8 machine guns firing away. And I was just thrilled by the precision of this setup. It was so perfect, I couldn't have asked for any better. The light was good, the enemy was moving away, but I could overcome them easily. And then as I ran out of enemies, I turned a swing to the left and looked down to see a flat field, and I was puzzled by it because what looked like circles in the field turned out to be, of all things, enemy anti-aircraft. And what was around like your tables here, each one circled by a number of men with equipment and so on. And surprise, surprise, they were firing at me. And I was, of course, at low level at this time. It would look like red-hot golf balls circling all around me in the air. And before I had a chance to do anything about it, I heard bang, bang, and maybe another bang. It seemed like I got hit by plane, not me. I'm delicate, can't take that stuff. but the Thunderbolt took it. But we got 2 bad hits in the engine. And immediately the engine started sputting black smoke. And what was remarkable about that black smoke, when it hit the windshield of my plane, it condensed. And apparently it started out as oil, was heated off the cylinder, came back, and was chilled by the windshield, and it turned into oil again. So the windshield was completely obscured by a flowing oil coming up in front of me. I was blinded to look forward, but I could still look out the side of the airplane. And I looked to the right, and then I saw a plane coming out the right wing. I thought, boy, this sounds bad. And to make things even worse, the engine didn't sound right. It dropped off in revolutions per minute. And I felt, I'm not sure this airplane is going to sustain me in the air, much less carry me home. So I began to think in terms of bailing out. I had several thoughts about that. One was, well, you don't want to bail out in enemy territory if you can avoid it. So I'll try to get away from this immediate area, so if I do bail out, I'll have a chance of surviving with the help of farmers or whatever. So I had a kind of fetish about not bailing out with my headset on. It was a crazy idea, but I reached up and pulled my helmet off with the earphones and the microphone and the oxygen mask and threw them overboard. And I'm thinking I was in Hollywood. I thought, well, the rule says you're supposed to throw the magazine or the maps away too, so they won't find out where you're from when they examine the wreck you leave behind. So I threw the maps away. And then I raised myself up. The fire was burning furiously, and I undid my harness and rose up. And as soon as my head hit that airspeed in the smoke, the fire went out. That blazing on the right wing. And I thought, well, I may be not going to bail out after all. So I settled back down on the seat and monkeyed around with the air control RPM on the engine, see if I could nurse a little more power out of it. And I realized with some confidence that I could make this plane at least move out of the immediate area. And beside me, my wingman was there, wondering what the heck I was doing. But I suppose he could see that I had jettisoned my canopy, and he could see I wasn't wearing a headset. So he wasn't attempting to talk to me. But the plane still smoked that huge black tail of smoke. So we set out in the general direction from whence we had come, and I began to grow more confident all the time. I said, well, if we can get a few miles away from here, I can belly land in a level field somewhere so I won't be in the immediate area of the enemy. And so on, and I praised that engine because she lugged along just as faithfully as if she had every cylinder functioning. And I looked at my watch, and it took minute after minute after minute, and I kept saying, how long can this engine waste oil overboard like that and not freeze up and force me to bail out wherever I happened to be at the time? Well, the story, as you see, I succeeded because I'm here back in action. The engine succeeded as well to carry us for at least 45 minutes it took before we could get back. And I was following my wingman because he could see straight ahead and he was able to navigate more precisely than I was. So he radioed ahead to our home base and said he had a cripple coming in. And I learned later, the reply from our control tower was, I hear you're coming in with a cripple, but I can't see you. But I can see smoke in the sky. So that must have been me. So then I began to think about, well, how do you land an airplane like this? It's all shot up. I was fortunate to have aileron control and rudder control and elevator control, and what more can you ask? They even had a little gasoline power. but I wasn't feeling right about the plane because it didn't sound right, because I had thrown my earphones over and my tight helmet no longer protected me from the racket, and it sounded like the engine was making its dying blast. But I was making about, I think it's around 200 miles an hour, which isn't bad. And so at that time I looked at it and I saw the hydraulic pressure gauge showed 0 pressure. Now that meant to me there didn't have any control over my landing gear and a lot of other things that run off the hydraulic system. And then I began to think, you know, I'll bet you what happened. One of those shells hit in the wing and cut the landing gear pipe through which the hydraulic fluid flowed. And the dutiful hydraulic pump said, well, we've got to provide pressure, so it kept pumping and pumping and pumping. And of course, that's where the fire came from. It was pumping fluid into the fire. And when the fluid was all gone, down to 0, the fire went out. Thank goodness for that. But now I don't have any landing gear. So I said, well, that's simple. I have a lot of fellows who made belly landings and walked away from it. And that's what I chose to do. As I reached the end of the field, I tried to nose the plane down, and I wanted to get it down to around 120 miles an hour, but the damn thing wouldn't slow down. After all this time pushing it, trying to make it go faster, I couldn't get it to slow down from 150. And the reason was, I think my reason, that I couldn't put my flaps down because of lack of hydraulic control. I couldn't put the wheels down because they were not dragging in the wind as they usually do. So the airplane didn't have this resistance to flow. So then I said, well, finally, I was looking over the side, and I could see I was running out of airport. And I decided to land beside the wire mesh runway that we used. And as I saw that the field was going to be disappearing in a moment, I said, I've got to just push the nose down and hit the ground the hard way, not directly, but on a slant, but not to, I don't want to just fly off the end of the runway and hit the cover back there. So I shoved the plane into the ground, and my body fell forward in the harness. For a moment, I thought my beautiful face is going to get smashed up on that little aiming device for gunnery. But it stopped me short. I had an splendid belt, they call it a sun harness, with both shoulders here. It just held me like a rock. And went along with my head hung down like that for, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 feet. But the plane finally decelerated. And as it came to a stop, the hood was already off. I just got out and ran off the end of the runway, off the end of the wing, because I didn't have to let myself down slowly. I used to have to step down 5 or 6 feet. I could just run off the wing because the wing was hugging the ground. And speaking of hugging, that huge 4-bladed propeller, each one of those blades had folded back over the engine, just embracing it. It had just spun and spun. And that's the end of my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Our next presenter is Cliff Saari. Cliff was in the 9th Air Force in Europe, assigned to the 362nd Fighter Group. He also flew P-47s and did mostly close support work, dive bombing and strafing from airfields in France and Germany. Please welcome Cliff Saari.
Well, Phil did a pretty good job of describing the B-47, so I won't go through that again. But anyway, I flew close support with the 9th Air Force, the 362nd Fighter Group in France and Germany. And when I joined the group, we were in Reims, France. And from Reims, We moved to Etienne, which was near Verdun. And after Verdun, we moved to Frankfurt. After Frankfurt, we moved to Nuremberg. And finally, we ended up in Straubing, Germany. So we were at all of these different bases. And when we took off on a mission, we had either a belly tank and two 500-pound bombs or a 1,000-pound bomb. And that B-47 would take a mile and just at the end of the runway sort of disappear and then come back up that heavy load. But we strafed a lot of convoys, a lot of locomotives, and when we strafed these trains, the flight leader would take the locomotive and each one would take one after that. And when the locomotive would be hit, all of a sudden the steam would come up and keep going by itself. And importantly, the end, the train started to run at night instead of the day so that they wouldn't be straight. And we didn't do much escort work most of that time on the strafing. But once in a while we get bounced by the Germans, and I did have one aircraft that I shot down and two probable. And had a few holes in the airplane, but probably my closest call was when we were strafing the train, and we were all done, and there was two cars left, and I asked the squadron commander if I could go down and make one more pass, and I did that. And as I got over it, it exploded, and the pieces of the car came up through my airplane, the wheels came down, and the fluid kept coming out, and my wingman was wounded and got the Purple Heart, but I was able to make it back, flying very slowly. But otherwise, I don't have too many other things that I have to say. Thank you.
This is not classified military information. How old were you at the time, and how old are you now?
I was, when I was in combat, I was 22 years old. And I didn't get the last part of that question.
How old are you now? I suppose I can figure it out, but my math is poor.
How old am I now? I'm 84.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Terry Coleman. Terry and his 6 friends left for flight training in California shortly after Pearl Harbor, finishing training in Florida in P-40s. And then he was shipped to Africa in 1943. He transferred to P-38s in the 82nd Fighter Group, 96th Squadron, 15th Air Force in September of 1943. And he moved to southern Italy. His main mission was escorting B-17 and B-24 bombers, taking part in 51 missions over southern Europe. He was reassigned to a training command in Texas until the end of the war. Please welcome Terry Coleman. Terry?
Thank you. You mentioned I was a P-40 pilot first. I had never been in a twin-engine airplane, and when we transferred, we were told to sit in the cockpit for a couple hours and memorize all the instruments. There were a lot of them. And we read the flight manual for a couple hours and tried to memorize that. And the guy who was in charge of my transition pointed to an airplane. He says, "That's yours, take it off." He says, "Go up and find a friendly cloud and practice landings." And when you drop the flaps and the wheels on that big 38, it has a tendency to nose over, and it's a strange feeling, but it's a very good plane. Anyway, I did it a few times, and something happened when I lifted the wheels and hit the flat panel. Instead of slowing down and starting over, I went, excuse the language, but I went head over heels, worse than that. And it wasn't a spin, it was a flopping situation. I flew back over the control tower, and I was flying like dog fashion. And he told me that one of the big flaps was stuck down, and that's why I couldn't fly very straight. So I got a little speed and a little altitude, and I jockeyed the flap panel, and gradually the plane started flying straight. And he told you we escorted B-24s and B-25 most of the time. And those were the people that really had a tough time. I think we had an easy time because we were all alone. We could almost do what we wanted when we weren't with the bombers. I flew the mission and came home. My wife was waiting for me. Well, she wasn't my wife then, but we got married. We had a short honeymoon, and I had to go back again. Are there any questions about what happened?
I have a mobile mic here. If anybody has any questions?
Right here. We did a little strafing and dive bombing, mostly long-range escort.
I've heard that there were a tremendous number of casualties during training, and that actually training is more dangerous than combat. Any of you men want to comment on that? Safety is not a major concern.
No. In some phases of training, the casualties were quite high, but I think that was just a little overblown. I don't think it was that serious. What happened mostly, they needed pilots. A lot of them were washed out of fighter training, and they were transferred to different types of aircraft, like bombardiers or pilots or co-pilots for the big airplanes. But we did lose 40% in primary training school. Anything else?
Well, I wanted to say thank you to you fellas because I was in the B-24 bombers in the Air Force, and you fellas in the B-38s were flying escort for us. And I remember I was one mission into Bremen in the B-38s were our top number. We were very grateful to have you folks around. And later on, of course, the B-47s, particularly those the checkerboard nose. I don't know if any one of you folks were flying those with the checkerboard nose. Saved our bomber because we were coming back from a Munich bombing mission, and we were very, very badly beat up. And spotted the 4 B-47s with the checkerboard nose, picked us up over Belgium, and that's going to run the rest of the way. Having said that, with a thank you, I also have to tell you that we had a hell of a time remaining airworthy because the airplanes from those four-bladed propellers and knocked us out of the sky because we were hanging at about 2.5 engines by that time, and we didn't have a great deal of airspeed or airworthiness. But thank you again.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we escorted B-26s and B-25s when we first got over southern Italy because the 15th wasn't organized with the big bombers right away. And we like to escort the 25s because they came off the target a lot faster. One incident happened when I was chasing a plane, and my wingman was falling underneath in a tight turn, and he should have slid underneath and got above me, and he slid over the top, and we both came together while we were flying, believe it or not. All 4 propellers were damaged, the bottom of his plane and the rudders were damaged on his plane, and the top of my scoop, and the oil scoop, and the top of my rudders were damaged. We kept on flying. We didn't even know that we had that much damage. But when we got down to the base, both of our planes were towed to the boneyard, and we never were able to fly them again. And we were given newer airplanes. start over. Is there any other?
I have one question. You said that they just gave you the manual on how to fly a P-38. You got no dual multi-engine training at all?
Never was in a twin engine plane. I was strictly a single engine fighter pilot.
Because you lose one in a multi-engine, especially like a P-38 with all that power and asymmetrical thrust and really tough to play with.
Yeah, they're very stable, and you can fly quite well with one engine. In fact, one of our guys had a single engine situation, and he was jumped by a Messerschmitt, and he turned toward him and dropped his tanks. The Messerschmitt ran into one of the tanks, so he just turned around and tried to catch up to everybody, and he went home okay.
Anyone else? Okay, got one on?
Oh, sure. I'd like to ask, what type of planes did you fly in training, and do any of you have?
Well, I started my flying the Piper Cub. I had 10 hours of time in the Piper Cub in Ada, Oklahoma. And then we flew the PT-19 in Bonham, Texas, and the VT-13, which we call the Balti Vibrator, and we flew that in Sherman, Texas. And from there we went to Eagle Pass, Texas, where I flew the AT-6. And then after I got my wings and went home on leave and came back, we got 10 hours of the P-40. And from there I was shipped to Camp Springs Army Airfield, which is Andrews Air Force Base now, and that's where I started to fly the P-47.
Bill, do you remember your first solo? Same story. Are there any other questions that anybody might have? Yes, sir. We have one right over here. Right here.
You were obviously very young when you did this, much younger than even I am and my children. How old were your commanding officers? How much experience did they have before they took
Their instructors or their
commanding officers in your combat units?
commanding officers in your combat units?
I think most of the Air Force commanders were about the same as what we were. Maybe Cliff too. My squadron commander, the first one I had, was 26 years old, but he started P-38s in California, so he had an awful lot of experience. And the group commander, Colonel McNichol, I think he was about the best flyer and best commander in the whole Air Force. I would say he was about maybe 30 at the most, and he had about 12 years, maybe 32. He had about 12 years in the Air Force. But because there were so many casualties overseas, he was promoted to a group commander. And he wore a little, what do you call it, a Scotch tan all the time when he was over there, unless he was in an airplane. He was a very colorful commander. Anything else about it?
What kind of casualty rates did your group have?
Our casualty rates, I would think, looking back, were very small. Once in a while, when we had long missions, like we had to go over to the oil fields in Ploesti or way up into southern Germany, we were probably more concerned with our fuel consumption than the enemy airplane. And then we were at a disadvantage because we were trying to go home and still fight back. But one time our group, another squadron, not ours, we started out with 17 planes they should have had about 16 at least. About 16 each squadron. The squadron started out with 16, and that was up near Regensburg, Germany. They came back with only 7. That was kind of an extreme situation, but the bombers, bless their hearts, one of my last missions, 50 of them were shot down, mostly over the target from anti-aircraft, and we only lost 2 on that mission. But that might give you an idea of what the casualties were.
Yes, right over here.
In answer to the last remark, I was in B-24 bombers, and we did indeed lose 45 at one time on a low-level mission, and I believe you folks were flying top cover for that. But in answer to your question, the B-24s suffered a 5% attrition rate for the lead crews, and they suffered a 3.1 attrition rate on the wing crews, so that mathematically we were supposed to fly 30 missions. You would just skim through if you're a wingman, and you get shot down or die from other circumstances after 20 missions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about the P-47 people. You know, I was in England for 27 months right during the war with a B-14 or a B-17 group, and P-47 pilots never quite got credit due for the dirty work they had to do during and after D-Day. You know, all the headlines were for the B-51s and the B-17s. And so the 47s just never quite got the publicity credit that they deserved. They were kind of like a lineman in a football team. They did all the dirty work.
Terry, what was the longest flight you experienced sitting in the cockpit? 7 hours. With 2 engines, you can stay up a little bit longer. Okay, are there any other questions? And one back here. There's a question back here, and then there's one over here.
Got a question for the gentleman who was in North Africa as far as my dad is with him here, and he was a mechanic in the 52nd Fighter Group. And he said that you guys had shared the same airfield. So what memories do you have about North Africa as far as where you were based there?
I really don't know how they kept everything running when we were in Africa. The temperature, believe it or not, would get up as high as 120 degrees. But during the late summer, I would recall around 10 o'clock, everything shut down because nothing would run when it was 120 degrees. And if we had any missions, they were actually short ones back then. And they would not schedule the missions till later in the afternoon. Because at that time we weren't escorting the bombers. But I would give all the credit in the world to the ground crew. As often as I did fly, one of my engines sputtered once, and I never had a truck around with that engine. And when we got interplane in the morning or whatever it was, we did not run up the engines and check the props and all the magnesiums. We run it up, check the props, and let it go. The mechanic said everything is ready to take off. So we didn't waste any gas or blow any dust around the place. Thank you.
Back there we have another question.
Well, again, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your experiences with us. I would say just I'm leaving my mother's eye. Miraculous disease. But I've always been fascinated by the 38, and so my question is for the B-38 flight. Really, what kind of altitude did you maintain over the bombers when you were flying top cover, especially when you wait to come back off target? And what fighter did you not like to see the most? Were you able to turn with them and all these other fighters? Or did you try to make guiding slashing attacks when you were trying to drive them off?
Did you get altitude?
We were never high enough over the target. German fighters were always above us. Our squadron, my squadron, was the first one to be equipped with a big P-38J's bigger engine and our COs. Today you go up over 30,000 over the target escorting the bombers. Believe it or not, the Messerschmitts and FW 190s were waiting about 32,000. We could never get above at the target. The bombers usually went over 20, 24, 25,000. And we would spread out either side of them or a couple thousand feet above them until they turned back over the target. Then we closed in a little closer.
Any other questions? Well, again, on behalf of all those in the audience this afternoon, I want to thank you for your service and to our country. We thank you all